I will probably take about an hour or so to see what I can do in this presentation, and then we'll probably open up for discussions, and then we'll come back again after the break. We'll talk a little bit more about contracting processes, etc., because that's an important piece as well. Good.
Yes, sir.
So thank you. So let's start off. So I am Venkat Santosh Kumar Delhi. Delhi is my surname. Okay, so it's coming from my forefathers. So some of you, I don't know, I'm not from Delhi. In fact, I've been only a few times to Delhi. Okay, I work in the construction technology and management group of Civil Engineering Department, IIT Bombay. It's a relatively new group. It started off about 4 to 5 years back when I joined IIT Bombay. And we have an MTech specialization in construction management now, and a flourishing research group with about 20 PhD students working on various aspects of construction management so far. So it's a busy group. And one of the thrust areas of the group is looking at what we call the digitization of construction, or which is now what we call the construction 4.0, like the industry 4.0. So there are many technologies which gel together to make construction again what we call the cutting edge, right? As part of it, I think BIM plays the what do I say, the core role. It's probably at the center of the all the technologies which are useful, and also which are driving towards just driving this digitization. See in this presentation as well. It's one of the fundamental paradigms. One of the paradigm is a good word which I would like to use, which based on which the entire digitization is moving forward in construction. If you look at our industry, the major problem, what you see about the industry is I'll give you an example from other industries, like for example, agriculture. Okay, so this is again from one of the best-selling authors in BIM. So this is the example from that person. Uh, if you look at agriculture, we have the same amount of land, or in fact, we have actually reduced the percentage of land which is under agriculture over the last few decades because of the urbanization, etc. You see that many of the fields and many of the agricultural lands are being converted to urban spaces, and land under agriculture is getting reduced. But then, on the other hand, you also see that the population is growing, but still we are able to feed all the mouths. Hopefully, if there is enough money, they can still get the food. There is no substantial food crisis. So agriculture, though we see that it's probably a technology starved industry. You don't really associate agriculture with advances in technology, but the productivity in agriculture has lived up to the population explosion. So still with lessened resources of land, etc., you have increased the productivity of crop, and you are still able to feed the population whatever you are. There is a green revolution, etc. Similarly, if you look at manufacturing and these kinds of industries, you see that the productivity has raised like anything, right? And then in fact you see that for the manufacturing industry nowadays is much different from what you see a few decades ago. A few decades ago, you would have seen a lot of employees working on different aspects on a assembly line, but a fully automated assembly line is not a futuristic thing. It's almost all the plants, especially in electronics and especially in automotives. You see that much of it is automated, and you see that a single person can actually do a lot of things nowadays. Unfortunately, this has not translated to our construction. If you see the construction industry, the productivity has stagnated from a long time. And in a way, the way we construct today is not very different from what we constructed a few decades back. Okay, there are advances, of course, but still that radical transformation has not yet happened. And we are seeing the roots of such transformation over the past few years. And BIM has been in the mix of these things, probably one of the major drivers towards this radical transformation. And that is why it makes sense for us to actually look at BIM and then understand how BIM affects and transforms the construction. So that is a reason why building information modeling is probably one of the topics which almost all of us in the construction sector should be aware of, because we would be working in this kind of data environment, this kind of paradigm in our careers. If you're a student, if you're a faculty, you should be teaching this. So essentially, BIM is a very important aspect, and that way this course I think is an interesting course, and it's also a timely course in that manner. So in this presentation, we will look at some advances of BIM and then understand how BIM has progressed through ages. And what we will look at now is essentially understand what are some of the applications of it, right? To start it off, I will give you one single quote, okay, simple quote. This is a very interesting quote which I like from T.S. Eliot. If some of you know, he's a great author. This is from The Rock. And this has been a very foundational quote for information sciences. So this is the quote, right? I mean, the first thing starts off with very philosophical thing, saying, "Where is life we lost in living?" We'll not touch upon that. That's a topic for another day. But the second two things are very interesting. So he says, "Where is the wisdom we lost in knowledge, and where is the knowledge we lost in information?" So essentially, T.S. Eliot, I think probably this is in the 1930s or 1920s, he has given this, this collection of poems called The Rock. So this laid the foundations of what we call the information theory and information sciences. So we would like to extend that for our engineering. Okay, so where is the information we lost in data? I will come back to why this is all important. So there is a wisdom which we lost in knowledge, and knowledge which we lost in information is what Eliot saying. And probably we have to extend that in civil engineering, where we will talk about where is the information we lost in data. To understand all these things, probably we should look at what we call the DIKW pyramid. Okay, so this is what the information sciences talk about. You can probably Google this or wiki this, etc. You will see the same kind of pyramid there. There are various perspectives of how to look at this pyramid. I will talk about one pyramid which will be helpful for you, one perspective to understand how BIM is progressing. So when we talk about this pyramid, you see that the data is the foundation of all the things. So you have a lot of data, and then you have information on top of it. You have knowledge, and then you have wisdom. Now, how do I differentiate between all these, different layers of seemingly very similar terms? You sometimes you interchange some of these terms sometimes, but there is also a very fundamental difference in each of those terms, as some of you might have already understood. Information has a lot to do with data, but we all know that information is a little bit more than data. Okay, so that's what we will talk about first. We'll get these foundations a little better before we proceed and understand what BIM talks about. So if I look at data essentially talks about facts and observations. So what do I mean by that? So essentially, data talks about what is there on the field. In fact, if I go into philosophical thing, it will talk about the truth, or at least your perception of the truth. So subjective or objective, that doesn't matter. It essentially tells you what is the fact. Okay, it tells you how many labor are on the field, or it will tell you how many cranes are on the field. Okay, or how many equipment are on the field. Very simple observations. How many people have left at 5 o'clock, how many people have come in at 9 o'clock, how many took a break at this point. So this is all data. Whatever you observe, it's all data. Now there is a lot of data. Now when I process this data, I am entering the realm of information. So I'm entering into the realm of information now. So when I start processing this data, when I look at this data, start analyzing something, and then probably what we call structure this data, we try to make something out of it. Okay, you have all done this. You've done a pie chart, you've done some scattergrams, this, etc., etc. You try to make some sense out of this data. You put in a context, saying that this is in this kind of scenario, there is a heavy rain there, this, etc. So you bring in a lot of data from environment, you bring in a lot of data from context, saying how mechanized is it, how skillful. If you start applying an information is essentially, if I can put it this way, my perspective, it's an amalgamation of a lot of data from various streams. You collate them and make some meaning out of it. That's what is called a information. Okay, so that's what the information part of this pyramid is. Now, when I come to information, if I make sense out of it, if I have some learning out of it, which I can then see, okay, this is a good thing which I have learned, probably something which you are gaining when you are attending this course, where you gain something about a particular area and which will give you some strategies about why some things happen. So it talks about some truths about something, why something happened, etc. Then we talk about the knowledge. Okay, so this will give you skills and experience, etc. And finally, when you apply why such thing happen and probably look at future. Okay, when you say that, okay, given this kind of knowledge I have, whether something is good or not. Okay, so that kind of thing is what we call wisdom. Okay, now there are many things which we say. So essentially, it will talk about why, what's the best solution, and all those things. So if I look at any industry, any kind of information or any kind of bits and pieces of data which is there, it's actually structured probably in this pyramid, okay, in what we call the data, information, knowledge, wisdom pyramid. And this is a very standard structuration of, in information theory, where and in fact if you go to IT and our related industries, they also talk about this. Okay, they talk about data layers, they talk about information layers, etc. This is very, very important for us because if you look at this, the information and data, they talk about physical aspect. Essentially they talk about how do I get data. Okay, where do I automate the data, or should I get it from manual interventions, etc., etc. How do I process them? Do I have a supercomputer to process it, or do I have a person who sits on Excel and processes it? So this is all physical. They are present on some area somewhere. Okay, either on a cloud, on a Google cloud, or or an Amazon cloud, or on your personal computer. You can actually look at this data sitting at some point. Okay, but when it comes to knowledge and wisdom, this is more the human part of it. It's more in the minds of the people who are working on the information rather than the physical artifact itself. So you do not really have an artifact which will say this is knowledgeable. Okay, you will never tell something knowledgeable. You will sell some human being knowledgeable. Okay, so essentially, if I look at this whole paradigm of information science, you will see that the data and information are important, but the human is also important because they are essentially then taking decisions on this whole data and information. Okay, now in a sense we are trying to move from here to here now, and then probably here to here. Okay, and this is where your artificial intelligence comes into picture, where I want the computers to become knowledgeable, to perform certain things which humans tend to do, right? So that is where you are trying to do. and probably at some point we might get a wise computer. Okay, we did not really say artificial wisdom yet. Okay, so that's a long shot at this point in time. In fact, we have made, I should not have drawn this much. We probably had this thing now in AI. Okay, because the human knowledge and human perception are quite a big thing for a computer to achieve. Okay, but there is a lot of stride from here to here. Okay, how to structure data into information, and this is where probably my BIM is coming into picture. Okay, so we will talk about this whole idea, and that is why this I stands for information. Okay, this information is because we are trying to structure a lot of data which is present in my site into certain structured, layered models, what we call the building information models. We will talk a little bit more on this. Okay, but this is probably, if we forget everything about what I am blabbering out here in this presentation, probably you should understand this. Okay, there is a data which we are trying to structure it, and BIM helps in that. And if we try to take some knowledge based decisions on it, then we are entering the realm of artificial intelligence, etc. And machine learning probably helps you to process information into knowledge. Okay, or probably process data into information. So it's essentially the tool which you use to do that. So we will talk a little bit on all these things in this presentation. Let me see. Okay. So what is the key challenge in our construction projects? Okay, so people have come up with so many things. People say there is a lack of money, there is a lack of human resource, etc., etc. But I would say the key challenge on our construction projects is handling the data and information. Okay, so let me give you one example of this. I hope many of you would have looked at this kind of figure. In fact, in the management context, this picture is probably one of the most abused picture of our times. So I have taken a shot at this myself to look at the story of our construction projects. Okay, so this is what it is. Okay, this is how the customer described to a project manager. Okay, saying that I need a swing, probably 3 steps. I don't know why that is required. Probably he has 3 kids, but I don't know why that is. But this is how a customer described to a contractor. Now, how did she understood? This is how the project manager understood it. Okay. Now, what's the problem with the second picture? There is nothing you can do. You will go and hit the trunk, right? There you cannot swing. Then this became a real challenge. Now, what is an information challenge? Because you did not translate the requirements properly, will become a engineering challenge. That's what happens. And this is how the designer designs now. Saying that, yes, the customer wants it right at the middle of the trunk. So we cannot, customer is God, customer is important. So we cannot, violate that rule. So what I will do is I'll put 2 supporting branches and then let the swing. But then the problem is who will sit here? Probably you have to lie down and swing if you want to do this, right? Then finally, what would happen is it will be constructed something like this because of certain problems, because some constructability, etc. Okay. Now the most is had that in, but telling the project manager, he told her something like the first picture. The problem is in terms of the interfaces and how the information data traverses this whole construction project life cycle. Okay. In fact, this is not very local to construction. If you look at the famous quote by Steve Jobs, he said that a customer doesn't know what he wants or she wants until and unless you show them what they want, right? So this is what he quoted when he was presenting the iPhone for the first time. So it's not a problem of this particular industry, but it's a problem with every industry where the client requirement is not usually translated to the actual structure on the field. And in construction, it becomes really complex because you cannot visualize everything. Okay. I will give you a drawing. You're all construction, faculty, students, etc. I'll give you a 2D drawing and say this is how your house will look like. You will still have some time before you visualize what exactly the house would look like. You might still have a problem in understanding the spatial component, whether my bedroom is large enough or small enough. Those are some things which are very difficult to visualize from a 2D drawing, right? And that's the first challenge which probably people have understood, and that's where the BIM evolution has started. Okay, so this is our construction story. Okay, now the challenge is there is a plenty of data. Okay, there is a lot of data which gets generated on construction policy. There is no scarcity of data. Okay, so you go to any construction project, you will find tons and tons of data, documents which are there. There is a project office, one single room is fully dedicated to this kind of data, etc. The key challenge is to process this in data, to organize them, to structure, so that it will be useful to us. So we are entering from that realm of data to information. That is the key challenge, and that is what BIM is trying to answer. Okay. Excuse me. So if you look at the information dependencies in projects, you will see that it's a web of lot of things. You see that probably you have seen some graphic like this over the last 2 days. You see there are different trades, at least in construction. You see architect, owner, surveyor, manager, and all these guys, they have to all communicate with each other. And what happens is sometimes what you convey as a change to one person might not necessarily be updated to the other person. For example, there is some change in the design or requirement, and the structural engineer probably would have told the architect that the beam size would not have gone to the services engineer who is designing the ducts for your HVAC systems, your central AC systems. Now, what would happen in that case? Your everything will be fine. You will go into the construction, and suddenly what you will see is this AC duct is going directly into a beam or something, which is very, very difficult to it. And probably you might not have enough space to reroute it under the beam because you might hit the false ceiling or something. So it becomes a huge problem. Okay, so essentially, when you have a web of such kind of information, flows across, it becomes very difficult to keep track of what is happening. And sometimes when a change is done, it doesn't propagate to everybody. So the basic fundamental idea of information management is to have a shared project model. Okay, it's not a single project model. All of you should understand this. When I'm talking about a BIM, it's not probably one single file. Okay, it's probably a network of files which talk to each other and try to stay at sync with each other. It's like the Google Drive on your machine, a local copy, and the Drive folder which you open in your browser, right? So they will always stay at sync. There is some mechanism where the sync is there. So if you try to change something in your document here, and then if you see that it is synced, it will actually sync to everybody. And in fact, there will be some kind of mechanism. If some other person try to open it at the same point, it will probably say that yes, this is getting changed. Please wait for some time. So essentially, it's a shared model. All of them will talk to a single nice interface or a single shared model. It's not a single model, it's a shared model. Okay, so that is what the BIM is aiming at. Okay, when you talk about building information modeling, this is what we are aiming at. When we have a single shared model across, shared project model across all the different disciplines. And this is what nowadays we refer to as what we call common data environment. Okay, CDE. That's what people will call in BIM. So they are essentially referring to this, where you have a shared model which will be visible, which will show the same kind of data to everybody. Okay. So the concept of BIM has evolved to address this issue. That is the whole crux of this BIM. Okay, so that is very important to understand this perspective, because all the advances in BIM are essentially, I can put them in the perspective of this whole idea of information processing and how, this whole idea of, shared data models and how you create information out of data and how do you create knowledge out of information. Vijay Garu, I'm still audible, right?
Sir, very clear.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. It's because I keep teaching to a screen. It's very difficult. I hope to look at audience, and then that would have been much better in terms of interaction. But hopefully,
Yes.
you're all getting the gist of the story. So we'll look at a terminology. Yes, madam. Yeah. Okay. So we will look at the terminology now. So BIM. If I look at this terminology itself. See, building information modeling, and it's not me, but many of the current crop of researchers, they have a problem with this terminology itself. Somehow this name stuck, but I think we are much better than this. Okay. So there are three terms in building information modeling. Okay. Now, when I talk about building, noun or verb, what is it? Okay. So for all the applications, for all the reasons, you consider that to be a verb, okay, not a noun. It's not about a building, okay. That's the first thing which you should understand. The building here essentially probably refers to the construction industry, okay. So that's probably it is. It would have been much better if we told it as construction information modeling, but then that would have also reduced it much, or we could have told it as built information modeling. That could have been much better, but anyway, we are sticking to this term because we don't want to change the term in between, okay. But building is not about a building, okay. So building information modeling has been applied to infrastructure projects like anything right now. If you look at any nice big road project, they have BIM as their backbone, okay. And in fact, the entire Crossrails project of United Kingdom, which is about connecting different rails, cities in UK with high-speed trains, etc. That has a huge BIM component in it. So building is not about buildings, okay? It's not about an apartment or it's not about a house. It's probably construction. Now, the only term which I like in this entire thing is information, okay? Information, I think if we come from the perspective of our data, information, knowledge, we are we have aptly put this information there because that's the layer we are targeting. We are trying to structure data. We are trying to put a context to the data to get nice intuitions out of it. Okay, we are not trying to generate a knowledge system or a wise system. We are trying to generate an information system which will help decision makers. Okay, so information is probably the only term which is which I like in this entire terminology. Okay, now modeling again. What is modeling? Are you really talking about the models which we generate, the 3D model or the 2D model or whatever it is? Or is it the act of building that model? What is that we are doing? Okay. So that modeling itself, I think a better way to understand modeling is we are modeling the information. We are sitting. So what's the puzzle like? So if I have different pieces of data, how to better connect this data to get a nice information model? Okay. So that is what we are looking at. So the modeling here doesn't really mean about 3D modeling or 4D or 5D, whatever. We'll talk about all those things in a moment. But then it really talks about how to structure data to get the information model. Okay. So if I look at building information modeling, though there is a lot of hype around it, people use it at a different in a different way across different things, but I think for because you have attended this course, you have seen my lecture, probably it's good to just stick to this kind of meaning where you say building is about construction, the process of construction. Information is good because it will structure your data, etc. Modeling refers to the generation of that information model. So when I'm talking about building information modeling, I'm looking at how best to structure my data in construction so that it will be meaningful for me to take some kind of decision for the projects. Okay, so that's the idea of, okay, clarify before we, okay, means this. Okay, the same thing is reflected in a lot of definitions. Okay, but then they have some kind of orientation to one or the other. For example, if I look at the Autodesk definition, they have a lot of emphasis placed on the model. Okay, 3D model based, but if you look at the key term there, they are talking about process. Okay. And some of you, though it's not a great reference material if you are doing research, but Wikipedia is a good source. It's not peer reviewed, so whatever is put on Wikipedia may not be true. Okay, so but we take it with a pinch of salt. But this BIM, if you take the BIM definition as well, it also talks about this entire thing. Okay, so the process is quite important. Okay, it's not about the model which you are generating, it's not about the software which you are generating. And the definition is put forward by the person or the organization which is actually giving out the most famous software for BIM. Okay, Revit, for example, is given by Autodesk, but still, when you come to the definition, the Autodesk itself tells that it's a process-based thing. Okay, so BIM is about process. Okay, I'm sorry, there's a spelling mistake here, double L. Okay. Key thing is about process. We will talk about process a little bit more in the next session after the break, but understand process is very, very important. So to summarize the entire, whatever I talked so far. So BIM, if I look at it, it's a new paradigm of information management on construction projects. So it's about how do I structure data? How do I structure this whole thing, put some context into the data so that I get meaningful intuitions out of whatever information model I structured out of the data in construction project. I keep telling this information data throughout this lecture because I want this to be reinforced in you when you go out of this lecture. So it's a common information model among all the project stakeholders. That's all it is. Okay, and then probably you might have been shown and probably will be shown a few in the next few days. Many models like this. Okay, this is a BIM model generated by one of my student. So the 3D visualization, what you are seeing here, this is just a small outcome of whatever BIM can do. Because the information is modeled, because the data is there and it's put in a nice organized manner, this 3D modeling is just but an outcome of that information model. Okay, so I have some kind of idea that this element is placed at some XYZ coordinate. Okay, somehow I've structured that data and pieced that thing together so that the software now knows that at that position I have to place that element. Now it's a very natural consequence that if I ask, okay, please generate a rendering out of this, it will immediately show me this nice picture because it already knows it. Okay, so that is why you see that there are so many layers. Okay, you see that the 3D, 4D, 5D, 6D, whatever, ND. Okay, you take n as many number you can put. These are just layers of data which you keep adding. Okay, so that you get those structures in. Okay, so if I just add time, now this is the standardized notation. Okay, so if I, instead of just having the geometric information, if I have some idea about the time also, here I know at what place this element is getting constructed. But then if I put also some information, some data saying that it will come at that point in time when I'm constructing, it will do a 4D now. Okay, similarly, if I put that, okay, it's made out of steel, it will cost you so much, immediately you get the 5D, etc. Okay, so 5D is about cost, you can go to 7D, and in fact there is nothing in our thing saying that it should stop at 7D or 8D. You can put n number of information data layers and it will become that ND BIM. Okay. Now, one key difference between BIM and your other kind of computer aided modeling and computer aided design applications, CAD CAM applications, is that in a BIM kind of environment, the software knows exactly the elements. Okay, so here the software exactly knows that this is a car. Okay, it's not just a small figure which you have put in, and then it's our mind which is seeing that there is a car. Okay, it's not a drawing. Okay, it's essentially an object in the model itself. So if I ask you how many cars are there, it will actually count and tell me there are 2 cars. Similarly, you look at these street lights, these are also part of the information model. Okay, so they are actually the objects in the information model. So the software exactly knows how many walls are there, how many columns are there, because you modeled the information. You structured your data saying that the column will come at that. You put the geometric information there, so that actual software knows the actual things which are there on the side. See a three-dimensional rendering, etc. in that as well. But that is different from a BIM model. A BIM model need not have a three-dimensional representation. Okay, it's about having the knowledge of the objects. Okay, the information about what objects are present, how are they interrelated with each other. That is the most important thing about BIM. Okay, to do that, many of the softwares today, they use the object oriented programming approach. Okay, many of you, if you did a course on programming, would know that there is a functional program and an object oriented program. C, for example, is a programmatic language where you go from static void main and then you write everything. Whereas if you go for C++ or Java or some kind of they actually allow you to define classes and objects. They allow you to define an object, and then you say, okay, this is the sister or the son or whatever daughter of that object, inheritance, etc. So similar kind of thing you will see in the softwares which implement BIM. Okay, because excuse me. Okay, I'll go ahead. I think that's just a disturbance. So there you'll see that there are similar kind of objects which are there in BIM. Okay, so you will see that the software actually define them in objects and hierarchy, etc. So if you have a BIM model, you will see that these objects are actually having the information. You can, the good thing about objects is that you essentially can put in lot of layers of data into the object. So when I have an object which says this is a wall, I need not only tell its the extent of geometric information saying that it will span from this point to this point, it's rectangle in shape, etc. I can also put in some information about the material. I can say that, okay, it's made out of bricks, or it's made out of concrete. I can also say that this is the plaster which is applied on it, this is the color it is, this is the thermal conductivity. So I can apply all those layers, and that's what we call these dimensions of BIM, where I apply different data layers and I get this whole idea of what is there in this BIM model. Okay, so that is how the BIM has evolved, and that's essentially an interesting tool for any project manager, because now you have a nice model which is, in a way, it has this structured information. When you query it about something, it'll tell you about it. Okay, so it's an intelligent model. It will tell you that, okay, if I want to know how many streetlights are there, it will tell you. I also want to know what's the wattage of the bulbs which are used in streetlights. It will tell you that, because that information is modeled into that project. Okay, so that is how BIM has been progressing. So any software, if you have an hands-on on it, you will see that you can put in a lot of attributes to any object which you model. Okay, that is why this full tool becomes a making. Okay, so some key characteristics, 3D representation, as I told you. The other one is about this parametric modeling. It's a very interesting topic. We will talk a little bit on that a little later as well, probably about 15 minutes from now. But what you can do is, because this BIM has this information about how different objects are connected to each other. So I know that a window sits in a wall. I also know that in the window there is a door frame which sits, and then there is a door which sits under the door frame, etc., etc. If I change an attribute, it automatically gets reflected in the entire model. Let's say if I change the wall dimension, the connections and everything gets set accordingly. Not only that, because I'm using some kind of template for a wall, if I change the template of that, all the walls which are using that template will change. Okay, so instead of material brick, if I change the template to, let's say, a AAC block or some fly ash brick or something, all the walls automatically get updated. Okay, and then you have the control of saying which data should be updated at what objects there. So that is a very important model. So because all the objects have parameters, if you change some parameters, the model gets updated automatically. Now this is a very important thing, because if we come back to our problem, if I change the depth of a beam, automatically there would be some indication to the HVAC systems, where we will say that, okay, the compatibility is not there. We'll have to see what to do. Okay, so it can take an intelligent decision where it can reroute itself, or it will leave it to the designer to reroute. Okay, so this whole idea of parametric modeling is enabled by use of this building information modeling. Okay. In about a few minutes, I will tell you how this whole idea developed in time. Okay, so now we discussed what BIM is, how is it founded in the information theory, etc. Let's just talk about how BIM developed over time. Okay, you know, is what we are also probably stuck in India as well, is to look at the 3D visualization. How do I visualize it? Okay, there are two very famous representations it started off, which took this basic 3D, 2D drawings and then try to understand what is it. Okay, one is what we call the constitutional solid geometry, which said that every object I can model by using a cube, a sphere, and a cylinder. Okay, so essentially, if you look at this figure, okay, I can get to this kind of model by having some kind of mathematical operations performing. I say that I have a cube, I intersect with a sphere, I would get something like this. Okay, this is like your set theory, right? Then I will take a union of this, I will get something like a pipe like this, and then I will again union with this, I'll get a three-dimensional thing here. Now, if I subtract this from this, I will get this nice little, I don't know why it is used for, but some kind of shape there. Okay, so you can get arbitrary shapes and renderings of 3D by modeling the entire thing on cube, sphere, and a cylinder. Okay, this is one thing. The other one, probably most of you would have also seen that in if you've seen the making of any graphics in any Hollywood or nowadays Bollywood or even Tollywood, Collywood, whatever movies, you see that this is a grid representation. Okay, so essentially you see that you define the boundaries of different surfaces and how they sit with each other. So you say that, see, essentially a tetrahedron is, essentially it has some planes and then they join at these things, and you try to generate those shapes. Okay, so these are two different things, and what you see is the BIM today uses a combination of this to generate the 3D. Okay, then people realized, I have to probably give me a second. Resolving, yeah, thanks. So then the first comprehensive BIM tool probably is the building development system. It has a 3D, very nice 3D representation. Okay, it's a very interesting. I don't have a snapshot of that software, but probably you should look at it, BDS, and in fact this BIM history is also well documented. You can search for it on internet. But that's probably one of the better softwares which try to look at BIM as a information model. Okay, then there is this whole idea. There is another software which is called RuCaps, and in fact, it's very interesting that some of the inventors of such softwares actually went and developed Revit as well afterwards. Okay, it also started looking at grids and analyzing how to do this whole idea of 3D. Okay, Then I think most of you might be aware of ArchiCAD. ArchiCAD has come in, and it actually looked at 3D. It's essentially one of the major advancements in the entire digitization space, where you started rendering drawings, etc., etc. Then this center at Stanford started off. It's called the Center for Integrated Facilities Engineering. They pioneered in what we call the 4D BIM. Okay, so now what we call the 4D BIM. Probably this started off in Stanford when they started, and I think they started off with understanding that we have to visualize construction through time. Then only we'll understand how to manage it. And that is how they started off. They started off with what we call the 4D CAD. They said that, okay, how the drawings evolve over time, let's do some rendering on it, etc. And now that is something what you see in the 4D BIM when you kind of simulate the timelines on Navisworks after you integrate Revit and all the other models and then run this thing. Okay, so that's an interesting thing. Then most of you probably would have heard about Pro Engineer. Okay, so that's also a nice software which looked at this solid element modeling, etc., which is very interesting. The the BIM, as we know, started off in probably 20 years ago or something with the advent of these things, okay, BDA, and then it transformed to what we call Revit, okay, and the architects of BDA are instrumental in developing Revit as well. And Revit interface is quite intuitive, and that's one reason why it became quite popular across the world. But there are a lot of interfaces today, a lot of softwares with today, which people always have certain affinity to certain software, but these are some of the milestones in BIM. Okay, the Revit has you have this objects which you can place and other things. It's quite easy to place families. Families are essentially the classes, etc. This whole idea of Tekla Systems, for example, has developed its own software, which is very, very efficient for industrial structures. So they have developed niche software into different areas. Okay. Then there's this GC Nerves is there. Now we talk about what we call collaborative spaces. What we are talking about is um, that we should be platform agnostic. What do I mean by that? It means that it doesn't matter if I am using Revit, you are using something else. If a structural engineer uses STAAD Pro, it's all fine. But then this information should all be modeled and structured. There should be a process on how to analyze the data and structure the information. So that's the space which we are talking about BIM today. Okay, we are talking about collaborated spaces. You look at all these Bentley Academy or Autodesk University, all of them talk about this now. Okay, it doesn't matter which software you come in, because especially in construction you have this issue, because the contractor is different from your structural designer, who is different from someone else. So what would happen is all of them have licenses to different software. Their skills are in different software, so you cannot force a single software on all these people. Okay, and not there is no single software which can do the entire thing what BIM promises to do, right? So essentially now we are looking at this collaborative spaces, and that's the reason why I emphasized on a shared model, not a single model. So you have different models. The structural designer will still have the STAAD model on which he or she will be working on, but then there is some kind of process, okay, some kind of interfacing with the common data environment. So if something changes in the structural model, it gets reflected in the common data model. So if I am an architect, I will always see the same interface, and if some changes happen from the structure side, I see them as changes in my model. Okay, so that's the holy grail of building information modeling. We're still not there. There are always glitches because all these softwares are proprietary in nature. They have their own interfaces. So there is always an information loss when you move from one software to another. So we are still in that space of interoperability. Okay, we are still figuring out how to do that, but we are there now. Okay. So I think that's how BIM evolved. Okay, so that's what we should look at. So now what I would probably take you in the next 10-15 minutes is what BIM can do now as of today, and what are some of the advances in BIM, what you would see in the next few years or in the next decade or so. So that's what the next 10 to 15 minutes is what I would focus on. I think this is what most of us are attracted to. Okay, in fact, many of the clients are attracted to, right? It's a realistic 3D rendering. Very nice. This is from common. All the images which I use are either my own or open source. So so you see that it's quite nice, right? I mean, in fact, some of the renderings are so realistic that you don't really understand whether they are real or artificial. Okay, so you get a sense of the space, how that will happen, and probably you will get some sense of some inefficiency or something. So probably you might want to say that maybe this space can be used better, right? So that maybe you say, okay, maybe I will put a small light here and hang a painting here. Okay, that way it will become a nice way or something like that. You can always think of and then this will become a huge value add to the clients. Okay, we'll talk about process in the next session, and you'll see that such kind of renderings will be a very important thing for clients to understand and fine tune their requirements, and that's one thing which BIM can do very nicely nowadays. Now this is an Indian, okay, this is outside here, who are using, say that okay, BIM is good because I can take 2D drawings printout out of it. Okay, it's like having a 3D printer and still say, okay, this 3D printer can give a command to a Xerox printer there, which will give a nice colored printout of it when you can print out the entire model. But still that is there. Okay, that's where our industry is, and you'll see that many of these BIM softwares are used to generate this 3D model, these 2D drawings. Okay, general arrangement, GFC, or whatever you want, good for construction drawings, for processes like stamping, client approval, and other things. And it's very good because earlier, when you have a drawing, for example, if you change the detail of a beam here, okay, what would happen is you have to look at corresponding sections in different drawings and then change that accordingly, and somewhere you will miss out something. Whereas nowadays, if I just change something in the model, automatically all the drawings get updated. Okay, there is nothing which I need to do there. Okay, now that is one use case which unfortunately the industry has latched on. Okay, the entire idea of BIM is to eliminate the use of 2D drawings, but somehow it has fed into this whole nice use case as well, which will stay for some time. Okay, but soon you'll see that with the use of BIM 360 and other forms of BIM where it's available on your phone, etc., the need for drawings might go away. But it will be there for at least a decade. Okay, so I think that's a good use anyway. Then you can generate these nice walkthroughs. Let me see if I can. This is again a small walkthrough which was generated from one of my earlier courses. You see that, and this one you can, believe me or not, you can generate it in just a click. Okay, so probably you have to spend about 5 minutes after you have a BIM model to define how you want to go through it, and then you can generate. This is for an office space somewhere in the country. And you see it's very realistic. You get a sense of how the corridor would be, how the manager's rooms would be. It's a nice way to look at things. Now this is something which you will see where people will talk about 4D integration. So this is again a model, so you will see how the building can be constructed. So what you will, okay, so you'll say okay, and if you look at the top left corner here, you will see that it's changing. So if I play it at a very slow rate, it will tell you exactly what week, what day, what element is getting constructed. So essentially what you did was you took the BIM model, then you took the schedule from a Microsoft project or a Primavera or somewhere, or even Excel sheet, and then you integrated them, and the software, go-to software right now is Navisworks for this. Okay, when you do this, you get this nice integration. So what I can do is I can probably take a snapshot here, say that okay, on Monday this time, this is how my building should look like. where are we? You can pose this question to the construction engineers, and probably they will say, yeah, this building is all right, but this building we are still at this level because there is a problem. Then you can go and update the schedule, and that gets reflected in your as-built BIM model. Okay, so it's an interesting way to look at things. Okay, let me see if I can skip it. Yeah, the other one which you will see is probably some people would have talked about it already, or would talk about it at some point in time in this course, is what we call clash detection. Okay, so you see that here there is a problem with some reinforcement. Okay, here a duct is going through the this is probably a HVAC equipment which is sitting right in the wall or something. So that kind of thing, when you integrate the structures model with MEP model, the mechanical model, electrical model, plumbing model, when you integrate them into one single model, then you will get this kind of clash detection as well. This is very important, because if you detect this problem after you go to a field, there's a lot of rework. Okay, sometimes the work might stop for a week or so till the designers figure out how to rectify the clash. Okay, so there might be some options, whether I have to drill a hole in the beam, or whether I have to reroute the cable. All these kinds of discussions will happen, and what would happen is there would be a stalling of the work, or there could be rework. Okay, you will already would have built the wall, now you have to make a hole in it, you will have to get some equipment to drill out, etc., etc. Okay, so this kind of rework, this kind of stalling of work, you can do it upfront. Okay, and believe me or not, when the first iteration of BIM models, when you get these structures, architecture and mechanical, on these things together, and when you run a clash detection, and it's quite easy to run a clash detection, what you'll see thousands of clashes. Okay, it's not a exaggeration, it's literally you'll see thousands of clashes in a decent size construction project. Okay, then you kind of figure it out, etc. So these are 1,000 areas where you have saved on the project time. Okay, but these are all very subjective kind of things, you can't really put a number to it, but these are very good uses of BIM. Similarly, you can do a lot of things. Okay, so there are so many things I can keep telling you. In fact, I have a course on BIM which runs about 6 months at IIT Bombay, and we keep talking about all these things. Okay, we say quantity takeoffs, cost management, life cycle analysis, building energy modeling, facilities management. There's so many things with the existing thing what you can do. Okay, so there are ways in which you can do this. Probably it's probably out of scope right now in my thing to tell how to do it, etc. At some point, probably you can explore these things, but it's very important. I'm here to talk about these things. Okay, so that's what I will do in the next probably 7 to 10 minutes. Some cool advances what you see in the BIM space now. First and foremost thing are what we call the generative designs. This is an interesting concept. What you see is a little bit of it, what I talked about it. Okay, you can automate the different design process. So instead of a cylinder, if I want a cone there, okay, all I have to do is to change some parameters in some automation, and literally you get a slider here. Okay, you get a small slider, and with a mouse, if I try to slide that from left to right, I see how my shapes differ. Okay, especially for architects, this becomes a very interesting thing, because now they can play with different forms and understand how that will happen. So the entire geometry. So you have some softwares, some third-party vendors which create this generative design aspects for you. Because it adds huge value, because now you can show different kinds of design to the client and get it approved. But the software vendors have also understood the importance of this. So this is Revit 2021. Then and this is what Revit does, right? It gives 1 year earlier version. Okay, so 2020 you already get a 2021 version. Okay, so Revit 2021 version, you see this generative design coming up. Okay, so I will quickly. This is from Autodesk, video on YouTube. You can check it out. Let me just mute it out so that I can talk about it. So essentially, this is something where they are trying to see maximize the spaces which has a window view. Okay, so you can see that this kind of thing has already come in now. Okay, so you can optimize your work layout. Okay, where you say, okay, this is my workspace. I'm just skipping it because you can watch it at leisure on YouTube if you want to. And you see the sliders there. Once you slide it up and down, etc., you get very optimized details of how to align your workspace. So this is probably what um, they have said, that this is how the workspaces should be put so that they get maximum ventilation out of this building. Okay, similarly, you can do it at a large scale. Okay, so let me just show you one more thing. Yeah, you can actually do a lot of shape analysis and then see how best to look at the form of a structure and finally decide that this is the best thing from an energy and a sustainability point of view. Okay, so you see on the left side here, right, this kind of structure, what you're seeing there. And then you generate it. So there is a nice generative design component which is happening at this advancement of this. Okay. Now the other one, what you see is how it can be used across life cycle. So again, let me just skip a few slides because of the want of time. But what you see is the major problem is you push information to the site, but there is no way you get information back from sites. Okay, that's what the other advancement in BIM is targeting, where I get data from the sites and then I restructure back them into my information models. Okay, so that's the second aspect, what we call the as-built BIM. Okay, because the feedback is an important cycle, and if you look at your PDCA and continuous improvement and all, this feedback is a very important cycle. Okay, so you look at plan, monitor, control. You always have some data from the field coming into this cycle, okay, in your management process. So this information flows from field to, but what would happen? Some, and I want to flow it back to the model. Okay, so that is what we are looking at. Okay, from the field back to plans. That's what we are looking at. So you have these nice feedback mechanisms like daily progress reports, all these things which people fill out at every day. So what you will see is essentially these daily progress reports, etc. now can be structured back. Okay, how do I do it? There are ways in which you do it. One of the things what you do right now is what we call as-built BIM models. We use the technologies like laser scanning, etc., to generate BIM out of point cloud. So this is one building at IIT Bombay which we did a laser scan. So you get your LIDAR, that's what they call, right, the terrestrial laser scanning systems, and then you place it at different points, get the point cloud, and then that to get a BIM model which can be then looked at. Okay. Now, the other one, we have done quite a few things. I'll just quickly show you a few things. Like, once you have a 3D model, you can then use it for, let's say, earthquake engineering. You just look at what's the seismic vulnerability of such kind of building, etc. So you can actually do a lot of information processing once you have that kind of building, right? So this is some heritage structures in Surat where we have done, and this probably is something which you already know. There's a team at IIT Bombay which does these things. It's also headed by Professor Raj Ramshankran. I'm thankful for him as well. Part of that team which does this. Now, the third aspect, I have four aspects. I've told you two aspects, right? One, about this generative design. Two is about the data from field to the model. The third one is how do I visualize this? No, 3D models are good. Can I have better visualization and structures? Okay, and that's where you have this whole idea of augmented realities. Okay, let me show you some things. Okay, so this is how the drawings might look like. Okay, so this is essentially what your phone renders on a drawing. Okay, so it might be the way probably people will start discussing in meetings probably in 5 years from now. Okay, So if you look at it, I'll probably show you this. So this is a person who is looking at a drawing from his mobile phone, and you see that the mobile actually renders the drawing, and then it shows you the orientation of the site. Okay, and then I can have a conversation with another person by actually rotating this. This is a system which was developed at IIT Bombay by one of my PhD students. So you have this augmented reality applications nowadays. Okay, so the drawing is not a drawing anymore, though you still use drawings. You have BIM which powers this kind of augmented reality applications. Then let which was developed. This is essentially a mobile-based game which was developed by one of my PhD students, where you can look at different aspects of safety. Okay, so essentially you go and click on someone, and then they will talk to you. There are quite a nice features in this. Okay, then you can go into one step ahead and then put it in a VR box. Okay, in a virtual reality. So you wear this nice VR headset, and you are transported into this virtual world, and you can actually walk through this entire site. Okay, and then there will be people talking about what are the problems. If you go someplace, they will say, no, you cannot come here, this is an equipment only area. It's an interesting tool for safety training. Okay, and many of the sites are looking at these kinds of safety trainings nowadays, virtual reality based safety trainings. Okay, so you see that it's quite realistic, in terms of when you do it. Okay, so this is how my lab looks like sometimes. Okay, where people start playing these games in VR and then try to develop these apps. Okay, so some of my PhD students doing that. Okay, the final thing, probably take about 2 minutes. Then we have about 10 minutes for discussion, 2 to 3 minutes, and this is probably where I would like to emphasize the final cool development. What you see, I've discussed 3 of the 4 cool developments which you will see in the next few years. The final one is this jump from information to knowledge. If you remember our pyramid, from data to information to knowledge to wisdom, this jump is what is the next development which you will see in BIM and related applications. Okay, so how do I transition from this information to knowledge, or can I generate some knowledge systems based on these information models? Okay, so that's the reason where AI and ML can come into picture. Okay, the first and foremost thing is, can AI and ML be used to better understand and implement BIM itself? Okay, can I use artificial intelligence and machine learning and the how to can I example your generative designs, etc. All these things, they come from this idea. Okay, where you are talking about how do I use machine learning, how do I use artificial intelligence to better structure my data so that I get an efficient BIM model. Okay, so that's one area. We are still in the bottom of the pyramid. Okay, we have not ascended that throne at least for now. We are trying to use AI to better generate our information from data. So that's the first area where AI can help right now. Okay, so and then this is a nice article in Autodesk University. You can go ahead and read that article. They talk about risk mitigation, generative designs, use of computer vision techniques to automatically detect safety problems, etc., etc. So these are essentially structuring your data to get nice information and probably giving you some support to knowledge. Okay, but not really there. Okay, now this is something which people are looking at right now, where they're saying that, see, again, if you look at it, this also comes from this entire thing, right? This explicit information is about data and information. Can I look at semantics which can go ahead and do it? Okay, so are there places where I need not define that this should be the case, but people know that that would be the case? Okay, so because the system knows that in this context, this is what is the appropriate one to put in. Okay, so if I have a see, one is about compliance. For example, if I put in a system and then it'll check with some rules like your IS codes or National Building Code or something like that. So that's one place. But there are these implicit assumptions. Okay, let's say if your client is someone who believes in certain belief system. Okay, for example, let's say you are building a residential complex and your client wants it to be many of India want it to already into the system where if I choose certain context, it will give me those symbolic representation. Okay, or let's say if I am building a nice ocean front apartment, then is there some kind of implicit semantics and geometry which already the system knows, and then it will align all my apartments to maximize the sea view, or a hotel with a number of rooms maximize the number of rooms with a sea view. Okay, so this kind of experience systems, where that this is what people preferred whenever they are building a hotel on a seafront earlier. So that's kind of an experience and a knowledge which the system itself brings in before you start designing the model. So that's what we are talking about when we talk about semantic enrichment. This is a nice paper which will probably come out in some time. Raphael Sachs is one of the pioneers in building information modeling. And this is what people are looking at now, okay, where the BIM can suggest you instead of help you. Can it suggest you? Okay, where now you are just looking at BIM as a visualization tool, but at some point BIM will suggest that this could be a good thing for you. Okay, in a way it might become a wise system, but that's very far-fetched. Okay, but at least it might suggest you some kind of options which you can choose from. Okay, it might not tell you that this is the best option available out there, but it can give you some options out there where our intelligence will then become much more uh, useful in terms of choosing the alternatives rather than using it in terms of organizing the data, etc. So the hard work is what the BIM will start doing it in a very efficient manner, and AI and ML is trying to help in efficiently structuring the data. And also they are this AI and ML are very, very involved in kind of developing this kind of suggestive systems. Okay, so that is where I think probably we are headed to. I hope I've given you a very, very broad overview of how the BIM developed and what are some of the advancements we would see in BIM in the coming years. I know that it's a very probably a 30,000 feet view of what the BIM is. So when you go into the nuts and details of it, it's very hard to do it, but still it's worth doing it. Okay, but still I hope to give you a broad overview of what BIM is doing right now and what BIM will be in the next future. Thank you. Some of the acknowledgements, some of my students and Professor Raj Ramshankaran, especially for those cool LIDAR scans and other things which he is instrumental in doing it. So that's more or less about from my side. I'm open to discussion. So whichever way you can structure it.
Very excellent overview on BIM. We should have done this your session on the very first day, because this is what we are all looking for from the introduction. I would request the participants to come up with their questions. Are you able to hear me?
I can hear you, madam.
Sir, there was one thing that I wanted to add. In the US, I have seen there was one county which has developed one app, not even an app. There was a small article published somewhere. A man is wearing this VR device and walking on a street, and behind him there's a van parked. So these two are connected. So the article says when he's wearing this VR device, he's walking on the street, he's actually able to see under the pavement of the road all the service lines, gas lines, water lines, sewage lines, and fiber optic lines. So whenever there is a complaint, instead of digging everywhere, they can actually see where the problem is and dig only that place. That is where one of the county is using it, sir. I thought it was one of the, I was pretty impressed with that technology. Is this?
Um, Hello. Can you hear me, Vijayji?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I think, what you say is true. I mean, there are a few applications, very interesting applications of what we call, this is probably comes under mixed reality applications, where you are aware of where you are, and also there is this nice HoloLens, for example, Microsoft HoloLens has it, which renders a few more information on it, right? One of the first applications what HoloLens had was when you meet someone on the street and then they talk to you as if they know you for a long time, but then you have the problem of recognizing their name, right? So this HoloLens actually has the face recognition, and it will immediately search on Google and tell you who that person is, so that you are saved from that embarrassing situation, right? So there are these nice use cases, and and coming to engineering thing, and this could be very interesting. For example, I think some of you could go on and then look at this MIT Labs AR in construction as well. They have this nice lens which they put up, and then what would happen is this entire let me just start off my video so that you can. So they have this lens which they put up, and what would happen is this is GIS enabled. Once you have that, and then you move your head this way or the other way, the BIM model is rendered on the construction site. So essentially, if I am a plumber or a carpenter or someone, and I want to know what's the layout of pipe or an electrical wire which I have to put up, that actually, when I put up this, the lens would actually show me where to put my line. So I need not refer back to the drawing or something. I can actually go and do that. Similarly, when you have repair, for example, what you are saying, that's a very nice use case as well. When you have something like repair, especially the underground utilities, it's a very difficult thing. You don't know where the leak. So it all devices, but you might have a nice sensor which will detect exactly where the thing. And then once you have a BIM model, you exactly know what kind of pipe which is getting leaked and fix it accordingly. So you have these different kinds of technologies which are coming up.
Yes, sir. It was very impressive. I mean, for places like India, we definitely need that technology, sir. Have you seen any of these applications being used in India?
Yeah, I will tell you, we are surprisingly very adaptive to these kinds of technologies. It's not like we are lagging actually. In fact, many of the BIM applications are actually getting implemented, but the problem is with the cost. See, I mean, many of these have investments, and unfortunately, the return of such investments are long term. So you can't realize the entire investment on a single project. So the management should have an outlook of realizing the profit over a long time. Then probably you will see it. But we are seeing it. For example, you have now drone-based progress monitoring. So you fly a drone, you get a video of the entire site, and then you compare it with a BIM model and then find out how your progress is compared to what it should have been. So if you have a 4D model, you can get it very easily from a drone. Okay, but there is a lot of manual intervention, but that is getting done. And many of the bigger companies, especially in areas where they have a problem in terms of understanding correct data. For example, if you are building a nice bridge on a border, okay, where you do not have reliable ways in which you get information, then probably you rely on such technologies where you fly a drone and you get the data, or some kind of sensoring which you do for the buildings itself. and get the data, etc. So there are areas where people are using it. Especially BIM is also being used for visualization right now. If you look at where it is getting used, a lot of it is using for 3D models. And many a times you see many of the designers are using BIM because their job of printing out 2D drawings is becoming very easy nowadays. At least that part they are doing.
I mean, it is just like adapting to the iPhone, sir. Like it has hundreds of capacities. We use it for phone, text, and photo.
Exactly.
Just like that, BIM also probably we are using for the visualization part, but it's also one of the best tools that we can visualize and have a walkthrough of a drawing, of a 2D drawing. It is very easy to convince the clients on how the space is going to look from an architect's point of view. And because you're able to integrate all forms of work and it becomes one platform, I think it is the future of the built environment anywhere in the world now.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. This is the way people would go forward. It's good that it's also imperative that we join the bandwagon as quickly as possible, so that we get skilled on that, and that's where we make a difference. When we are skilled. And one area what I see in terms of BIM adoption is we are having a lot of business in terms of BIM outsourcing. So earlier it was about business process outsourcing, BPOs or what those things are, KPOs, knowledge process outsourcing. But nowadays you see this because it's mandated in UK and many of the other countries, the use of BIM. So many of them are actually outsourcing BIM, the generation of BIM models and all, to our country. So you see a lot of companies who are in the business of developing the BIM model and giving it back to them. So there is this nice thing. So the skill is actually getting developed. Even before the BIM is adopted on our sites, we have enough people who can actually generate models and other things for us because of this whole process of outsourcing which is happening.
Excellent. That connects us to our students and placements. So we will talk about it once you complete the next session. If there are further questions, we will wait. Otherwise, we'll go for a short break, sir.
Sure.
Anybody?
I take it that all of them are very interested and they understood everything what I said.
Yes. Yes.
Good. So let's. So the next session is at 11:45, madam.
Yes. Yes. Let's start 15 minutes and have a break. Yes.
So it's the same link, right?
Yes, sir. Same link.
Okay.
Yes,
So I'll just stay on, but I'll switch off my video and audio, and we'll
Yes, sir.
start off at 11:45.
Sure. Sure. See you, sir.
See you.